Hello everyone, I've got an interesting best of 3 for you all today on my YouTube. It's Fantasy versus Creator, a TVP from the Alima League. If you would like these replays, all you have to do is go to patreon.com/olymoly and give just a tiny bit of cash over to the most amazing, probably longest running weekly tournament to be seen, never be done in StarCraft, and so on and so forth, yada yada. Point is, you should do it anyways, but also if you want the replays, because like, this chick can't cast, I can cast better. Well, I challenge you to do so, I suppose, but specifically with these replays. This was not cast by the mainstream of the Alima League, which would be Maynard's stream. Sometimes someone else's, but usually it's on Maynard's. So this should be a treat. I don't quite know what's going to go down here. Let's do the intros, because that's the official thing you do in StarCraft. On the top left, as the blue Protoss, it is Creator. And on the bottom right, as the red Terran, he is Fantasy. I will say that this is from the round of 8s. It's the April monthly finals, which usually has 8 people. Their points are collected throughout the month, and then that gives you 8 people, round of 8. Well, that works out, right? But I think in this Alima League, there is like more than even like, there's like 2 ties for 8th place. So they actually had a kind of a very small round of 16 bracket. But yeah, we're here in, you know, round of 8, Fantasy versus Creator. TVP, Fantasy being an old Brood War pro. That's more what he's not necessarily known for. Maybe at this point in time, if you're watching this video, you probably know him from StarCraft 2. But in terms of his peaks, right, it's going to be looking back to Brood War. He actually was a very good Brood War player and was even, you know, you could definitely argue on his way to being one of the, like, best long-standing Brood War players. In one of the last, I believe, OSLs, which was the biggest tournament in Brood War, he was able to defeat Flash and get to those finals where he was ultimately defeated by, oh god, Jongbi, I think it was. This is a very, very long time ago, and then we had, you know, the mixed pro league where Fantasy, you know, did okay with Brood War, and then we had all pro league StarCraft 2, right, where Fantasy really got overshadowed by his fellow SKT players. You know, the likes of Innovation started to come up there, and it was a tough life for Fantasy. But after going to the military for 2 years, as all young Korean men have to do, he came back to StarCraft 2, not Brood War, which is kind of a big deal. But I've talked about that before. I won't do it again. I won't bore you all. Just that it's a case where he comes back to StarCraft 2. He, you know, maybe likes the style more. It fits him better. He enjoys it a bit better. But he's not really performed so well in it. So he is still kind of like an online hero, and honestly, not even that sometimes. We still have so many other of the great StarCraft 2 players actually participating in the Alima League or XY other online tournament that Fantasy still gets overshadowed. Creator as well, but Creator is like pure StarCraft 2. I think, like anyone in Korea, I guess they played Brood War, but I don't believe Creator ever did anything professional or even semi-pro. Back then, it wasn't just like, oh, he won a couple tournaments, like you actually had to get a professional license. It was a very different structure, so... Now, Creator's just been here since the beginning of StarCraft 2, and most of you should know that he had his ups and downs. He was like almost the next best Protoss, and then never really reached that height, along the lines of like, you know, the times that MC was really the best Protoss, stuff like that. But he did have a lot of good ideas, and occasionally he really shows that he can still be a great Protoss. But oopsie-dipsie, poopsie-oopsie, well, goodbye, Oracle. Really nice placement of units here for Fantasy. Also had one on the front just in case like an Adapter Stalker came by, or the Oracle decided to really try and circumvent such a one of mine in the main by being a little sneaky going to the natural. Didn't work out though, did it? So now Fantasy feels really safe picking up those one of mines and going for his own drop. Yeah, Creator could have been following up with the Phoenix, but in this case, just a second Oracle, so the medevac should be able to drop its cargo and probably even get away. It will also be scouting a third Nexus, although I think the Reaper just did that and died for it. So either way. We'll see if that does any damage. I don't have any units prepared here. A couple Stalkers now warped in. Going for the drop. Creator's not paying attention. Good God, don't do that. Okay. Pulls the 2 probes are being targeted back. That was very, very dangerous. You stack your probes like that, and you're causing actually more problems if you pull it a little late than if you just not pulled at all. But that worked out fine. Oracle will now track this medevac and cast Revelation, and that'll be Gucci. So back at fantasy side, all right. Now it's this works out well. I was talking about his Brood War history. In Brood War, you would go into mech versus Protoss, and fantasy was that guy that was trying to make some of those Brood War strategies work. When he was first transitioning over to StarCraft 2, he would go from bio into mech versus Zerg, and then he would try mech versus Protoss occasionally. Well, mech versus Protoss is actually kind of in terms of like everyone's doing it, right? If you're watching GSL this week or last week, then you see a decent amount of mech and two different styles of mech too, just like you would see versus Zerg. You have the Cyclone mech and you have the just tank mech. So I'm not sure which one Fantasy's going to do here, but he's going to be on 3cc. He's not going to be harassed very much or at all because of the way that Crater is open here. Not a blink opener, but rather a Stargate opener is really more about the faster third, which he got. And then just keeping tabs on what your opponent is doing. In this case, Fantasy isn't going to be doing a whole lot in terms of attacking. So he's going to worry about drops, getting revelations on medevacs. He just has to worry about maybe a cheeky tank push, but that is not what Fantasy's setting up for here. He is looking to set up just his third with the gas taken as fast as possible. The Oracles did not dip in to see the multiple factories, so I guess Crater is still in the dark as whether it's mech. This is a totally normal unit combination for early to mid game TVP. What's going to change is that you're going to see another Cyclone for some reason, and that's going to be the weirdest thing. A third tank would have been the weirdest thing, but seeing two more Cyclones, yeah, that's weird. Oops, these actually did not pop yet, so we haven't missed anything. Crater is totally prepared, just trying to deny as much mining time as possible here, and it is a decent amount of mining time, brings the units back as well. Not that, again, there was much going to be done on Fantasy's side of the map. Creator might just be getting used to dealing with mech players, right? It probably is plaguing a ladder a little bit as far as the Korean ladder goes, and you're really up there in the top 50 since it is kind of the trend, the flavor of the month. And he might already be predicting it, or maybe, okay, well, that's weird. Or maybe he is just going into what he was, already planning on, but is it double robo? Yeah, he went in double robo. I mean, he does have 3 bases, and he could go into like double pumped Colossus here if it was a bio player, but I think just by the lack of aggression, you start to kind of figure things out. It's a little more obvious, again, maybe in like TVZ, where the Zerg player's like, oh, okay, you haven't dropped at 6 minutes, you haven't dropped at 7 minutes, you haven't dropped it at all. Okay, what are you doing here? And then also see like a bunch of Hellions running around, right? But no drops, no pressure, just a really quick third taken by tanks, and then just now getting in there and seeing the number of Cyclone and Hellions. Yeah, Crater should absolutely know at this point. But he was already making disruptors, so I want to say more like he has predicted Fantasy to do this, as opposed to this being a normal thing he would do against a bio player, but that's hard to say. Fantasy is that guy who would jump on a new trend train, but he also said a guy that kind of he wants to start them as well. He kind of has similarities with Gumiho, but maybe not the mechanical prowess, unfortunately, which is an odd thing to say for someone who comes from Brood War, but it does seem to be something lacking, so that Gumiho continues to do well in GSL, and Fantasy unfortunately never does. What's the secret ingredient? I don't know, I'd have to watch a bunch of their games, but the point is, he is like Gumiho in the sense that he will try something new, he'll really try to push it as well, but just never really being the trend center that maybe you would want to be. So currently we have Creator just blinking around with these stalkers, right, which is totally fine. Having to recall out here, though, is going to lose him 1 stalker. These 2 are just going to try and leave. More Prism getting set up to go for some harassment. Could be bad news. Actually, Fantasy has a couple missile turrets, so I don't know if that's going to do anything. Looks like Creator had a little bit of lag or something like that. Actually, no, he asked for a pause. Okay, and then he said, sorry about that, go. Okay, something happened. But as it is a replay, we just go through that. We just breeze right through that. So the missile turrets didn't actually stop this Warp Prism. As hard as they tried, it still dropped off the Zealots and even got 3 more warped in there before the Cyclones could hop on top of it. Some okay SCV damage going down here. Cyclones, hey, what you doing there? All right, 13 SCVs go down. Not too shabby. It's more about the distraction, I would say, as Fantasy has been roaming around here. Oh, okay, decent amount of Hellions go down there. And another 2. Wait, was that the Raven? Yeah, that was the Raven. Oh, nice pick off there. Anti-air missile. Or even just actually interference matrix on the disruptors would be really big, but we are at a count of 8 disruptors. While Creator was sharking around with his stalkers, he wasn't just hoping that mass blink stalkers would do it, right? He was pumping from 2 robos disruptors and is actually going up to 10 disruptors. So that actually is not even something that one Raven can interference matrix every single one, right? This is going to be complicated. How do you deal with that many disruptors? Obviously, Cyclones do have the mechanic where if they get close, they can retreat, but I don't think they actually, like, it's gonna be a really, like, fine test of are they faster than the disruption shot? And then, of course, you know, if they run into the disruptors while they're already shooting, uh-oh. No! Oh my god, so many Cyclones just going down. Oh, so much of Fantasy's army that he had been setting up, now gone. Oh gosh, he was in a supply lead, I think, up till that moment, and, you know, obviously Creator was catching up as well as going into higher tech here with the Tempests, but what a brutal loss, just simply not paying attention. I think Fantasy was scanning at the same time, so he was trying to determine maybe how he's going to deal with the Tempests, but actually, and he's getting Drilling Claws right now. I think it's just a good addition if you're going to go mech. Cyclones do perfectly fine against Tempest. The key thing is that you need to be able to lock on and actually get all your shots off on the Tempest, and then, you know, that's not such a problem. But if there's Disruptors on the ground, if there's Zealots on the ground, if there's, you know, whatever else, Storm even, can be effective against Hell Cyclone, both of them not with a lot of hit points, then that's when the Tempest just add a bit of poke, and there's not much a Cyclones can do about it. But if it was like pure Tempest, then that's just actually laughable against Cyclones. Cyclones, I don't know what their kill shot is on Tempest, but it's pretty low. Try to highlight that when we see them actually collide here together. Upgrades are even up right now. Yeah, 2-1, 2-1 on the attack. I don't know why they, I guess it depends on what they got first. Is that the difference is? Anyways. Tanks are siege up here, so that's something that Creator hasn't had to deal with quite yet. Fantasy's Attempts at Harassment have been doing so well. But he's trying. So the tanks are providing that range against the disruptors that he hasn't had to deal with before, but if the core of the army is still Hellion Cyclone, they still have to get in that range, which creates that awkward dynamic of if the disruptor's already shooting, you are going to lose some units. Widowmine's also not helping a ton. Disruptor shots will be quite good at taking care of that, even with the Drilling Claws, and actually Creator going in here. This is going to be really awkward. He's going to be running into a concave, but one disruptor shot already goes through. The tank's actually not quite in position, just taking care of some Zealot reinforcements. That's not super helpful. War Prism drops off the Storms, which are hitting some of the units. Not the biggest, baddest Storms we've ever seen there, but there's still so many disruptors left. 7 of them. The Tempests do go down to be very quickly. Like, that's 3, 4, I mean, I guess they get like 6 or 7 shot by the Cyclones, but Cyclones not that slow of a shot. That's still pretty nasty. And what initially looked like maybe a bad positional engagement from Creator ends up being just quite a good engagement considering the army he has against what Fantasy was showing right there. But man, if these tanks had actually been involved in the fight, I think it goes very differently. Creator was so clumped up. He was basically surrounded there, and 5 or 6 tanks shooting on that clumped up army means the disruptors would have died before they all got their shots off. I mean, it would have been absolutely so different. But even with that said, the 3rd CC it was basically always going to go down, along with however many SCVs that was. And Creator is on 5 bases himself, so the Warpins do go in favor of the Protoss player, kind of that weird flip of the dynamic. When you're actually playing mech against Protoss, you were the slower builder, you were the slower expander, and the slower player, even with Cyclone mech, which is definitely a little bit faster than, well, a lot faster than tank mech. But we were on the actual ramp leading up to Fantasy's production, and it's a ramp, it's a choke, right? So every time he ducked in there to get a shot off with the Cyclones, he was getting potentially hit with the Disruptors. We're down to 1 Disruptor in the army. He's not even rebuilding them right now, I think he sees the kill move. He doesn't need to go back into disruptors. He just needs to warp in stalkers, and eventually he can just go ahead and blink on top of all these units. The Tempest Arsenal aren't being reached, so they are adding just a little bit of damage here and there. A couple Widow Mines on the high ground. We're probably looking more towards the Tempest, but they are barely reaching the stalkers. There's another blink forward, though. The tank comes out, but way too late here. Warp isn't even trying to help out with the storms again, and Fantasy is absolutely dead. But if there's one thing you know Fantasy for, it's probably you've heard the Fantasy GG timing. He's a little less known for that nowadays, but he does take a little while. So being there, 190 supply to 78. Creator dominates the mech styling of Fantasy a lot with those disruptors. So well done, and we'll get to see what happens in game number 2. Here we are into game number 2 on New Repugnancy. In the bottom left, up 1, it is the blue Protoss Creator. In the top right, as the red Terran, he is Fantasy. Trying to show some mech. Got into a decent position, too. I mean, all things considered, right? With Creator's opener into the Stargate, Fantasy didn't have to worry about dealing with the early game shenanigans, either a stalker attack or maybe more focused War Prism harassment, something like that that could actually hurt a mech player who's still building up their production. Now, he got the 3 bases rather easily, even 4 bases rather easily, did get a higher supply than his opponents and tried to shark around, but Creator's decent use of his stalkers to buy time and his economy, which you do get from that Stargate fast third, was able to get the double robo up and running with disruptors, meant that by the time Fantasy, well, I want to say by the time he pushed out, but actually what happened, right, was that he didn't push out. He was at home, not looking at his army, and then Creator suddenly appeared with all those disruptors, or close enough suddenly appeared because it was a big surprise, and killed like 30 supply of units. That was unideal for our red Terran. It's so life goes, right? If Fantasy had maybe been more active, maybe I'd actually been able to push in as opposed to, okay, this probe is really gonna get a CV? Come on. No, he could repair it. Yeah, okay, that's what he starts doing. It's obnoxious to repair, though. Repair takes a percentage of the cost of the units, right? So now we have this awkward 3-8 instead of 0-5, right? It's just a little awkward. Anyways, if Fantasy had been able to actually control the map and really bully the Protoss back, that's when we've been seeing the GSL games, for instance. That's when we see the mech style even look kind of good, and you're like, oh, okay, hold on, like, we've been underestimating the power of mech versus Protoss. But then again, I mean, at the same time, you see the Protoss down 30 supply, and you're thinking, wow, it looks pretty good. We do see such things like disruptors suddenly come back and do very well against them, or they just are able to get a little bit of harassment done, forcing the Terran player to pull back, or, you know, XYZ things seems to happen as mech is still being fleshed out versus Protoss. And there is definitely still that big overarching question, which is mech actually good versus Protoss, or is it something that is just specifically good against what Protoss do in the current meta, right? That's kind of the thing about StarCraft 2, we have patches, we have new maps, absolutely, that do drastically change things, but then we also just have player ideas of how to play the game, right? By the way, another Stargate opener, maybe Creator's going to go with the same styling as Fantasy. Going to read into that. He did see the Stargate, maybe go for an earlier attack, hope to catch Creator when he is being greedy. We'll pay close attention. We are New Repugnancy, though, and it's definitely a bunker map. No ramp here to help you out. Depth is getting shaded over. Both the depths, actually. Nothing quite ready to go, but Fantasy being very cautious. Doesn't even have anything on that low ground. Except this SCV, which is going to die. Feels bad. Okay, so not even Oracle opener, by the way, Phoenix. But yeah, back to the meta talk, right? That's what... It's probably one of the reasons that, like, Adepts suddenly are turning heads once again. I want to spoil GSL for you guys that haven't been able to watch it, as there's been so much StarCraft on this last week and the upcoming week. But Adepts have been doing work when most people would say, like, oh, Adepts are done with, it's over. Well, maybe not quite. Maybe they're coming back because the Terrans are building X or Y way. This micro from Creator may be a little too fancy for his own good. Losing one Adept, certainly not bad. I'm losing 2 adepts, getting a little suspicious, and then the third one coming across the map is like, it should only be used to go ahead and check where the Oracle would usually be flying in right now. It would have been killed by the Cyclone, but also in this case, again, Phoenix, not Oracle, so he's waiting to bulk up a couple Phoenix. This does 2 things, right? One, Fantasy is like, okay, is he going Phoenix? Is he going Oracle? What's going on here? And is a little in the dark, but then, you know, suddenly Phoenix show up and he's like, oh, shoot, it's actually, you know, a decent number of Phoenix. And then 2, if Fantasy was to go for a medevac drop, then holding them up until the count of 4 or 5 would definitely just slap that medevac in the face. Easy pick off. But speaking of easy pickoffs, Vikings, the best thing about Vikings is that they have range. It's pretty much the best thing about them. And I guess now their anti-mechanical ground attack's pretty damn decent. But yeah, is that they have range. But if they're pounced upon like that, searching for an Oracle and not expecting a decent number of Phoenix, the rate of fire of Phoenix will always win. Just the sheer numbers of them, of course, as well, makes that a bit obvious. But that's where the Cyclone comes in. That's where another Viking comes in, for instance, and suddenly the Phoenix aren't quite as good. Actually, with the change of how the Viking shoots, there's a change in the Viking, not just for its anti-mechanical ground damage, but also its air shot. It changed the kill shot of 1 Phoenix versus 1 Viking, so I think a Viking wins that now. When in the past, it didn't. I haven't had to talk about it, though, just because you very rarely see such an important battle as 1 Phoenix versus 1 Viking, right? Anyways, Creator goes into that 3rd Nexus. Is this as fast as last time? Maybe. I think so. 2 Vikings again. Such a big difference. The Cyclone comes around. Creator is going to continue to poke and prod the Phoenix. He's actually not stopping his production of them as well, so even going up to 6. We generally see 5 be the number, maybe 3. But beyond 5, it's not really something you see too often, unless they're going to like Phoenix Colossus or something like that. So Fantasy, with a very similar army to what he had last game, but with the addition of a couple Vikings and of course the SCV pool, is looking for that attack. Creator not prepared for this. As soon as he realized, hey, where's your army? He cancels the 3rd Nexus just before it's finished and has been adding on shield battery. So I guess he knew like there was potential here. I don't know if it's really going to be enough. He just doesn't have a lot of units. Phoenix will help pick up the tank, but there's still so many Marines left. They are target firing the Phoenix as they should as well, so the tanks are getting their shots off. The bunkers, while not finished, do provide a little bit of that Sim City to help funnel in the Protoss units. The tanks are extra effective, and the bunkers actually are going to finish in this case. No target fire on the SCVs. Very difficult thing to do when there's also, you know, tanks to be picked up and Cyclones be focus fired and so on and so forth. And that is a big problem. 1 Disruptor pops out here, but 1 Disruptor will not kill a tank. We'll need another shot beyond that, and he's not even going for a 2nd Disruptor. He's only on 1 Robo this game. So he's trying to go into a Colossus to probably help out with that Marine count. Also poke at the bunkers if the tanks aren't right up against them. I don't know, man. That was a decent first attack there for Fantasy, who is rallying across while getting his 3rd CC. Creator would love to maybe go harass if there's an open opportunity, but he needs these units back at home in case Fantasy really jumps on top of him. Disruptor tries to go for the Cyclones, but if Fantasy is paying attention, they should almost always be able to run away. Unless they're foolish enough to, duck in to try and get a unit and then run away, and then maybe it's a little more questionable. Liberator comes here to help out, and on top of the cover of the bunkers, the Phoenix and a missile turret, even missile turret. The Phoenix can't really help against that. They do go for some reinforcements. That is a great thing to do, but here comes the official break. It's do or die here for Creator as he picks up the Cyclones and a tank. He takes care of 1, but his Phoenix are done so fast, and of course, not even helping with the Liberator, which is getting a ton of shots off on this army. The Colossus wanted to help so damn much, but its actual attack power is not that scary. It's more about, against Marines or against a lot of units, but not against structures or tanks necessarily. That's not where the Colossus really shines. And unfortunately, with that Liberator just free firing, I think this is going to be curtains for Creator. It's exactly what Fantasy should have done. Creator is being a little bit greedy last game, and while I think he was maybe a little less greedy this game, right? He didn't go for 2 Robo. He still went for that 3rd base under cover of the Stargate, and the Stargate doesn't actually scare Terrans who are going to do that attack, right? The Stargate's almost always going to be harassment, and if you think there's an opportunity, you can pick up, well, not pick up, but you can move across the map, take a couple SCVs with you, and try and do some damage. And with Creator not really expecting that, being a little late to having his army in a decent position, you want to kind of try and catch the army moving across the map, not just let them come to your front door. Creator is unable to hold against this specific build, but we do have a game 3 to go into, so let's see what happens in the conclusion of this best of 3. Here we are in the last game of the series on Kairos Junction. In the bottom right, as the blue Protoss, it is Creator. In the top left, as the red Terran, he is Fantasy. Alright, so Fantasy, you know, changing up his style, the build just like the tiniest little bit there. The addition of Vikings is kind of this weird thing that initially, you know, a year ago, you would just basically say 100% they're going defensive, might even get a quicker third CC behind that as they try and hide information from the Protoss or assume they won't take any damage from the Protoss with, again, a harassment style opener. But nowadays, while that still is a possibility, getting a Cyclone and a Viking will make you very safe against Oracle openers specifically, but even against the Phoenix openers. We now have the attacks that actually utilize those Vikings. So if you go for a tank first, you know, tank, and then Viking, and you bring that across the map with whatever Marines you have and a couple of SCVs, those Vikings either, if it is a Stargate, help target fire the Phoenix that are lifting the tanks, which is kind of the Protoss's go-to, and they're like, oh my god, a tank push is on the way. Or they land on the ground against any other style of opener and add a lot because, like every single Protoss unit is mechanical. So there you go. So it can be kind of a difficult thing for the Protoss to accurately assess, because imagine if Creator had assumed Fantasy was going to attack him in that first game, and that didn't get such a fast third, didn't go into the double robo so quickly. Would that have been a drastically different game? Who knows? Or in that last game, what if he assumed that it wasn't going to be an attack? Well, that's kind of what happened, right? He got the third up and was a little too late to the shield batteries, was a little too late to having an army try and install that out. I think we did see, if we went back to that replay and really looked at Creator's vision, there's probably a moment where he was harassing with his Phoenix and he went, okay, hold on, where's the army? Why aren't they doing anything against this? And then that's when he threw down his shield batteries and tried to get set up there with the cancel of the Nexus. But it's the kind of difficult thing is that such an attack when you really can't just see like, oh, they have a billion gateways. Of course I will defend against that. I will change my build against that. Against some of these other builds, you can't really change your build so much. You kind of have to work with what you have, and while that still includes changing up where you're putting the chronos, canceling miscellaneous upgrades or buildings you don't actually need, such as a third Nexus or a +2 attack that's nowhere close to being done. You are usually like, okay, stop pro production, chrono other things, and try and stall out this push as long as possible, which didn't really happen for a Creator. It's also just a nasty push. So I will say, like, kind of the general overall theme of this best of 3, and a lot about Fantasy's potential mech. He was going mech last game, by the way. He had another factory behind all that. And, you know, does he tank burst, doesn't he? Creator has been going Stargate every single time, which is just a little bit odd. Now, Creator has almost always been a Stargate player in my mind. Obviously, he follows any trends, so it's not 100%, but it, like, for me, I'm like, it doesn't surprise me that much. But when you have, like, strong blink attacks to make against Terran, when you do have the potential of those tank pushes while you're trying to get that decently timed third, it feels like the Stargate is showing up less and less. Like, I would say maybe at one point, right, it was 80% of games, and now it's it's 20% of games, or 80% of the games now might actually be the blink openers. And any variation of that. And then we have the addition of some adept all-ins and so on and so forth. It's never quite cut and dry like that, but the point is, for him to go Stargate every single game, it makes sense that Fantasy could kind of read into that and be like, okay, if he's gonna go Stargate again and he's gonna do this thing again, I'm gonna change it up like this. So, once again, Creator going for the Stargate is going up to Phoenix, no Oracle, Did Fantasy actually get any scouting done? No, he didn't. It was like, I didn't think I saw a Reaper. There wasn't one. No Reaper, no SCV scout. He does not know it's Stargate once again, but, you know, might be reading into it because Creator is Creator, because Creator has been doing Stargate every other game, right? He's not going to see some Adepts at the same time that he sees Phoenix, but that will tell him all the information you would like to know. Oh, it was a little bit in the supply depot lift. Oh my god. So we see Fantasy building a wall here, but we also saw him not go, again, in a Reaper or Viking or even Cyclone. He is going to go for an even earlier push than last game, but Creator, I guess reading into that, right, like I know that you know that I know, blah, 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 actually didn't go for a fast third. He added a Robo immediately after the Stargate, or close to it, and is adding a robotics bay right now. Forge probably won't be that helpful, of course, but here we go. Phoenix showing their helpfulness at least a little bit by denying a tank rally across the map, so that's one less tank in about 20 seconds here. That could be a big deal, or maybe it doesn't ultimately matter. Maybe the Phoenixes should have been back here helping against this, and they are going to be recalled. The Viking in the main base is actually quite dangerous to probe, so he had to take that seriously. That means that half his army was on the front lines, and the other half was preparing to try and come back and deal with this, but now all of the army together, will it be enough? The Zealots actually get on top of a lot of this army. The bunker, well, not even bunker, missile turret will not finish. The tanks did not get saved from the Graviton lift, and Fantasy absolutely fails in that attack. Creator, having set up for that just a little bit more than the previous games. He did not go into a fast third Nexus. He wasn't, you know, stupidly greedy by going third Nexus before extra gateways. And in fact, in this game, he went for extra gateways, 3 gateways, I say extra, but 3 gateways, and even a Robo with some nice Phoenix liftoff. So that was nicely called, I suppose. I do think Fantasy also kind of tipped his hand a little when the Phoenix and Adepts were able to scout that there was no defensive Cyclone, that there were 2 tanks, and that a wall was being built, because the wall also kind of signifies, like, I don't have to deal with any of your Adepts shading in here and forcing me to come back. But obviously the wall doesn't help against the Phoenix that were lifting that 1 tank. So nice read there from Creator. Multiple ways, now just kind of controlling Fantasy. I don't think you'll be able to break into as many tanks as there are with the support of the anti-air on the high ground against the Phoenix lifts. So he will go back home and be content with denying a Fantasy that tank push. Looked a little scary though, didn't it? With 1 shield battery, like 4 Zealots and 3 Adepts, I was like, that's not an army. But then the rest of the army finally came forward. So Creator goes into his 3rd Nexus now, and we should be able to delay Fantasy's 3rd. And if I may be so bold, it might actually be able to straight up deny it if Fantasy tries to take it a little too fast, and it's this conundrum. And especially is brutal for mech players, where if you take your 3rd too fast, you don't have to defend it. But if you take your 3rd too slow, then it significantly impacts your gas and your 5 factory production, so that you still feel very weak in the mid game. So you need to find that perfect balance of getting your 3rd and not dying because you get your 3rd. And that's just, I think, much harder to do with mech if you're in a position where you're behind, where you could argue with drops because it's, or bio, sorry, it's more about minerals, like, maybe you can skirt the line a little bit more, but no, it's going to be brutal here. Creator, though, not pumping everything into production. We got kind of a small Protoss army looking for some potential, but it is small. Is going into a very fast 4th base, is now getting extra production, extra upgrades, so there was not that big burst of gateways and an attempt to bust Fantasy, which, you know, without charge, without blink, it would have been very difficult to do. The best thing there would have been the Phoenix liftoffs, which Fantasy is well aware of, and he is dumping that extra mineral income that you get as a mech player into missile turrets and walls, which definitely the best thing to do, right? 100%. You gotta recognize what your opponent can do to break you and counteract that. Now, if you're so far behind that your opponent just literally has 50 more supply, well, there's not much you can really do, but if you recognize that Phoenix are going to be what's going to be able to break you, then guard against the Phoenix. So Fantasy does get his 3rd. Had a pretty good time. It wasn't too far after the 3rd was actually done and turning into an orbital. Gets his gases as fast as possible, but is missing a guy on gas, and it is such a small thing, but it is a brutal thing to have a mistake on, as you are really limited by gas. That really sucks. Maybe he'll fix it, maybe not. Phoenix gonna continue to at least scout around, maybe a freebie barracks. On 5 factories, you're kind of at that comfortable zone of production. If you're gonna get extra production in a later part of the game, probably more be like a second starport, I would guess. But if we're talking really far in the future, you might want 2 or 3 extra factories. I didn't notice they already had an extra orbital. But again, this is kind of that weird, like, well, it's great to have a 4th mule or to be able to take a 4th eventually. 1, do you really want an orbital to have your 4th? And 2, mules do not mine from gas geysers, despite that brief period that they did. And as such aren't really going to be used, so it's kind of weird. But it's also like, what else are you going to do with the minerals that you have been accumulating, which again, he's doing here. Yeah. Although Fantasy just not producing enough, I guess, waiting for those extra 2 factories to finish. Banking just a little bit here. As Creator's army is kind of set up outside of his base, that's the worst time to bank, probably. Creator's gonna have 1, 2 upgrades in a second here. He did prioritize the armor, which is a little funny, considering that he wasn't going into Zealots, and he's not going up against the high DPS of Marines. He's going up against big shots of tanks and Cyclones with their upgrade. But he is going into charge eventually, of course, and the armor does help disruptors, is what I'm like kind of thinking of more so. But upgrades are upgrades, and they're always good, right? Oh! Nice little microwave there. Creator certainly seems to be in the better spot. His 4 bases have been up and running since like minute 9, I want to say, like gas is included. He's got all this production. He's going right into the further upgrades here. He's got Tempest on the way in case Fantasy does turtle enough. Because Tempest, well, you know, again, if they're... Ooh, that one disruptor died pretty quickly. If Tempests are out on the map and they're concaved on or caught kind of lagging behind the army, Cyclones demolish them. It's a different beast if the mech player is defending. Cyclones in general not as good at defending because they run out of space to maneuver. And they're kind of crybabies, right? Like they'll be all tough and like run up to you to get a lock on, but then they'll be like, please don't hurt me, and they run back away. So the Tempests are able to poke and prod, and then you try and chase after them with a lock on, and then the Storms, the Stalkers are right here, something like that. It just gets kind of nasty. It's a way to potentially break a turtling player, whatever race it might be. But you know what? Fantasy does get to 4 bases with Mr. Turrets on the way again. Stopping any liftoffs, but also could help against the Tempests. And also a little bit of SimCity. But this is not a planetary, so that's where things get really concerning as far as run-bys go. When you talk about charge lots, a couple tanks aren't that great at defending against those, right? We'll get the Observer. Always pesky to have that, seeing exactly where your army is split up and where. Fantasy, if he's going to be good at something, it's going to be good at turtling with mech and defending with SimCity. That's like all you did in Brood War versus Protoss. So the fact that he has survived that kind of scary period after that push, it didn't really do as much as he was hoping for, is good. It was also something that Creator was willing to let go since he's going so much into the economy, so much into that long game. He's basically saying, you might take a good fight, you may take a couple good fights, but I can probably outproduce you. Probably. Or out-tech you or something along those lines, as he does add on more Stargates, so if there was a significant lack of anti-air, which is really not a lot of Fantasy's army is in Hellions, then a swap into that could be dangerous, and so many Hellions, oh my god. Why are there so many Hellions? I was like, they're not gonna be able to kill the Nexus, but of course they did get a lot of probes. Let's check the worker loss. Not as much as I would think. I guess that makes sense. That was like the first probe loss, really. Okay, a couple over here, too. Creator, this base is his 6th. That's a lot of income. They've both been around that 70 worker count. Fantasy now comfortable on 4 bases, though. Oh my god, he's not even defending this base. Zealot run-bys would murder this. That's the risk you have to take, I guess. Yeah, Fantasy can feel a little comfortable for a little while, but getting to that 5th should be quite difficult to do. Armies kind of passing each other in the night. Hellion's going to transform to help take out the actual Nexus after taking out all the probes, but Creator is looking for an engagement. His army is a little weird, though, right? Like, you have a lot of different speed here. Disruptor's falling behind, High Templar's falling behind, Temp is going a little too far forward, so on and so forth. He's got to be careful not to let those units get caught on lock-ons or accidentally walk into tank fire. And he is. He's being careful. collects it together again. Fantasy has a decent number of Cyclones, an okay number of Vikings up against a Tempest, so I'm really looking more at the Cyclones. It's more that his army is that tank-based type now. So many tanks that have to reposition, and every time they reposition is an opening for Creator to get a couple shots off of his Tempest or send a Disruptor shot to them. But actually, Creator getting almost a little stuck here. There's no defenses at the 4th base, which means that he's kind of safe to go through here. No Planetary either for some splash on an army walking by. So just maybe he'll be able to get out here. It is awkward, but even as we watch some of these big, powerful Protoss units go down, this is causing a lot of chaos for Fantasy, and Creator is the one with the bank, but he does lose a lot of the slow building units here. So the Tempests have gone down. The Immortals will shortly go down unless these reinforcements can actually save them. Just maybe they can, but the Colossus goes down. Warp Prism almost goes down. Nice save on that Cyclone pickup. Fantasy having to chase after that army had so many of his tanks injured, but not quite dead. It was more just that they couldn't catch up and all siege together, because if that was the case, if we had like an upgrade to make siege faster, which would totally break the game, then, you know, Creator probably makes a mistake by doing that little walk-in like that. It was potentially so awkward. And imagine if 5 tanks were here and he got sandwiched. That could have been quite bad. But it wasn't there. So he rebuilds the army that he lost. Now, a lot of it is the Stalkers. He doesn't have as many Disruptors, but, you know, that's more because he started adding in more Immortals, I would say. And to be clear, Stalkers really aren't bad against mech. They do have extra damage versus armored, and they are at a 3-2 upgrade. And they can catch those tanks when they're not sieged, right? But it's a different story if the tanks are sieged and together and protected. Then they are suddenly good against the Stalkers. But that's the question, isn't it? Are they all together? Those 2 on the front, not so much, but these back here through a bit of a choke are going to do quite well against Creator if he pushes in. This is when he would want to send those Tempests forward to kind of poke and prod, but the Cyclones are keeping him away from doing that, and there's no just like high Disruptor count that's going to stop him from getting those lock-ons on those Tempests. So Creator might not have the composition he actually truly wants. He's kind of going with the amount of Immortals that he has. He's kind of going for more of that straight-up bust potential. But he's not finding the army out of position. And he has all the supply also going into Tempest, which... I mean, their attacks aren't bad against the low-health Cyclones. But, again, if they're caught out on the map like this, they will go down pretty fast, like a dozen lock-ons. Fantasy has taken out 2 bases, of which Creator can actually at this point not even afford to remake, but hasn't bothered to as well. Fantasy got his own 5th base up and running and has never just even scouted the top right base of it, so that's why it hasn't gone down. I was wondering about that. Fantasy using his army really well to control the engagements. He's never caught quite as awkward as maybe he should. He's also getting Creator in some of these awkward chokes, even here taking some really good shots on the army coming down the ramp, and the Disruptors, well, now trying to get some good shots, just aren't finding it. I mean, there's still only 2 of them, so even if they found some decent shots, it wouldn't be the best. Fantasy actually bullying the Protoss army here. Some harassment was attempted by a couple Stalkers, I guess, back there. It doesn't really work out. Now that high stock auto tracking is done, I just accidentally walked over there. DT harassment could start, and I'm really surprised, by the way. I'm like, this is going to be the biggest regret, I think, from Creator, is not taking advantage of a 4th base that he saw wasn't a planetary and wasn't protected. That probably should have had some DTs or Zealots on top of it. But instead, it's not Fantasy who's been losing bases, it's Creator. He's lost 2 bases and should be losing this one, as Creator is in no position to really save it. It's just desperately trying to get DTs to save the day, but Fantasy has a surplus of scans. He hasn't really had to mule all that much. And he does have at least 1 or 2 extra orbitals. The attack onto the production line is often where games start to change over, right? If you get on top of that Terran production, if you get on top of the Cyclones as well so that they can't maneuver back, then that's when the mech army, specifically of the Terran player, really starts to hurt there. Really starts to suffer. But Fantasy is trying his hardest not to let that happen. At the same time, the Nexus is still going to go down here, along with a lot of probes eventually. But Fantasy, all about the micro on the defensive, has yet to actually get jump on top of them. A couple Wood of Mines do help out here. A couple Cyclones on the backside as well, but he's going to be microing in 2 different places at once, larger than even my screen is showing, and I'm zoomed out here. So as you see, Fantasy does lose those Cyclones on the bottom side. He just can't micro them at the same time he's microing over here. And while he's getting a couple lock-ons, he's not actually getting those death shots, those kill shots. War Prism almost goes down, but not quite. Is holding those High Templars, also helping break the lock-ons on the Disruptors. One Disruptor goes down, but Creator might have just found a way into the Terran's base, into the Terran's army. Oh my god. Oh my god, the Disruptor shot has made up for all other missed Disruptor shots. That was so much to go down there. Oh, and finally, this unprotected third base is going to die. That's what I like to see. Now, Fantasy didn't just get this base, but he also got that one. But Creator did, I guess, replace this finally, and it's actually still kind of healthily mining. So Creator with 44 workers and 2 base mining is doing just a little bit better than Fantasy's basically mined out third and still not really mining fourth base. Ooh, this was a very close series, but Fantasy, as he holds his main base with tanks, that's great. He can't hold those important bases. He needs to get his mining back up and just simply can't do it. His lock-ons are never quite killing the units, either getting hit by the Stalkers, Tempest, or Disruptor shots. People call it Disruption, I don't know why. Maybe I think I'm Disruption Web, as they're watching Mech versus Protoss, I don't know. But Fantasy's not done harassing. At least he's trying to do something with what he's got here. And while Hellions are obviously better than a single tank at harassing things, he actually hasn't been able to leave his base, so here he comes now. Those Widow Mines, unfortunately, kind of useless. There's an observer overhead. If those had gotten 4 shots off each, that's pretty worth it. And not to be the case here. You know how I said that like Creator might regret not taking out this base? I guess I should say that Fantasy should regret never checking this one, because when he was bullying this base, it seems only logical he could have killed this one too. Would have been a lot less mining for Creator to have, as this game has gone into the low economy stages, almost base racy, almost. As he does have a decent army up once again, he's been able to position his tanks, reposition his tanks away from just protecting his production. Tempest's gonna go down here. Nice pickoff. Just, it's so annoying. Again, maybe you jump on top of it, maybe you kill it eventually, but while it's still alive, the Tempest is adding a lot of pot shots on your army, on your kind of low health army too. Not just because Cyclones have, you know, only so much health, but also the amount of damage that everyone is taking here. No one able to fully recover quite yet. What is the other? Is that, oh, wow, that army actually came here a lot faster than I thought it was. I thought that was a second army. No, that was the army protecting the tanks. Comes over to protect the new fourth and does so quite well. Decently well. Taking on a couple units. An Immortal almost gets a Disruptor. Creator looking to blink on top of him, though. He's got enough Stalkers that I think if he did blink on top, and especially if he stopped the retreat of the Cyclones, it would have been rather good, but misses the opportunity. This game is definitely not over. Now that Fantasy has this base secured again, is able to send over the SCVs and Mulehammer it eventually. He does have 4 orbitals still. He just has to use so many on the scans that actually maybe he can't. Oh, he Mulehammered this one. That's what happened. Makes a lot of sense, though. This was probably very intentional. This is the base that's most likely to be killed, so take the minerals while you can get it, which means drop those mules. And this is exactly what happened. Unfortunately, the mules only get about half their lifespan before the base is denied and straight up killed. But that was a very good idea there from Fantasy not to mine out this one, which should be protected, especially with the tanks that are covering it. DTs are going to be such a nuisance, though. He has to be careful about muling any base whatsoever with DTs still in the mix. Does he have a starport? He actually has 3 starports. It was kind of awkward, though, as he was trying to get into the other type of production here, maybe Liberators. That's when everything went to hell. So, no Liberator production maybe could have helped, and no additional tech lab for Raven, which maybe helps, maybe doesn't. It would have been very difficult to actually control in such a fast-paced game, but man, a couple interference matrix, a couple of anti-air missiles could have made a huge difference. Fantasy is unable to stop the army from getting on top of his production, and that might just be the GG button there. Cyclones will die instantly to this army. Production is not going to be happening here for Fantasy. He's also run quite low on the gas. He's now returning with the rest of his army, hoping to trap Creator, but we all know that Protoss is never truly trapped. As long as he's got energy on any Nexus, he can recall, and oh yeah, he has energy on these Nexus. But Creator's not in a hurry to recall. He's basically saying that you come to me, And if you do it improperly with tank sieges, then I'm gonna pick off these units. Oh, nice Widowmine shot on all those High Templars. That was a nasty grab of high gas units. We do see our first Liberator on the way, by the way, which might help. Might help. You know, so many stalkers, that's a big question mark, but maybe. You could also do some harassment. I'm not sure if that's what Fantasy's thinking, though. Speaking of harassment, space go down. It's being denied too, but Creator retook this one, so this is when a couple of Hellions go down here, and it's deadly, very deadly. But even if the economy was killed, oh my God, what am I? It's another great shot. Most of the tanks have been killed. Yeah, even if Creator's economy has been killed, I think he just straight up has gotten to a decent enough army to end this game. If Fantasy was at twice the workers, twice the income, let's say, then I wouldn't be so on board the Creator hype train. But considering that Fantasy can't even get above 70 supply here, because of his economy, because of his production, I think that's going to be good enough. Tanks trying to guard against that blink in, and they did. At least got some revenge on the Stalkers, but, you know, Creator just has the economy set up. Whether it's minerals or gas, right? Whether it's Stalkers, Zealots, or maybe just pure High Templar for some Archons. You'll be looking a little bit better. Fantasy using a scan to at least deny Creator vision. Maybe he accidentally walks into the tanks, blinks into the tanks. Maybe his Disruptors don't get the best shots because they're truly blindly firing at this point. It's something, I suppose. Tanks are going to deny this base, which I can't believe how long this base has been mining. And it's not even been fully mining, so that's why it's lasted so long. But the tanks went down here and then never really went up here. It's been a little odd. DT is going to get a very efficient kill. 2 kills, in fact. 2 tanks go down. This tank not being repaired is going to be literally 1 shot from death. Raven is now on the way to help Fantasy out as he finally swapped that starport over, but it's going to be a little bit too late, and I'm afraid this won't really help. Controlling a Raven in this game would be so difficult to do when you have Blink Stalkers, Tempest, feedbacks. Yeah, that just wouldn't have worked out. This is going to be game over for Fantasy, and series over for Fantasy as well, as he is at half the supplies of opponent. Granted, some of that is in the probes, which he's currently killing, but a lot of it is in the army supply. Fantasy's army would have to never be touched, basically. It would have to always get lock-on to be able to run away. And then we're talking, you know, maybe, but that is unlikely / impossible with Blink and Tempest range being what it is, as shown here. Interference Mages could save maybe the cycle to the Tempest shots, but it doesn't matter. GG is finally called, and Creator takes the 2-1 over Fantasy's mech stylings. But what that last game was pretty cool. I thought maybe Fantasy did end up taking this at one point there, and if he had denied that top right base, if he had more Hellion run-bys to the bottom left, I mean, what if, right? But still needing to refine the mech usage, and of course just props to Creator for kind of utilizing the maybe the weakest part of mech. And this is still a weak part of even Cyclone Mech, which is you can kind of run it around a little bit, buy a lot of time, and in the case of Cyclone Mech, you can also get some nice pickoffs because they are kind of low health. But really good stuff there from Creator, who, if this was the tournament, would have advanced on to the round of 4. But thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the series as much as I did. Looking forward to more mech shenanigans versus Protoss as the meta develops. And I will see you guys next time for another StarCraft 2 cast.